C-SPAN welcomes to Newsmakers this week Congressman Kevin Brady, a Republican of Texas. He is a member of the House Ways and Means Committee and a chairman of a key subcommittee. He also is the vice chair of the Joint Economic Committee. And with the new speaker election on this Thursday, the day that we're taping, he has also announced his interest in succeeding Paul Ryan as the head of the Ways and Means Committee. Mr. Brady, thank you for being with us this week.
Thank you. You bet.
Well, let me just start with the new Speaker of the House, who announced, Paul Ryan, as he was taking over the gavel, that he wanted essentially a fresh start for the House of Representatives. How long do you think his honeymoon is likely to be?
You know, it may be longer than people believe. Paul Ryan really is a once-in-a-generation leader. He is going to bring new ideas, new energy to the conference. It is a fresh start. And you've got someone who's led two committees, who understands that you can let legislators be legislators. You can actually empower people to bring their ideas forward. Some of them may be partisan, many of them may be bipartisan, but he's going to put in place a process that we can move our legislation. And I think that's something that's very exciting.
Well, let me bring into the conversation the two reporters who will be joining us for questioning this week. Emma Dumaine is of Roll Call, CQ Roll Call, and she covers Congress for that organization. Richard Rubin is tax policy reporter for the Wall Street Journal. And Emma, we're going to pick it up with you.
Thanks, Susan. Thanks for being on with us, Congressman.
Sure.
As Susan mentioned at the start of the program, you are interested in succeeding Paul Ryan as chairman of the Ways and Means Committee. Can you talk about what you would bring to that position, how you would be similar to former Chairman Ryan, how you would be different leading that committee?
You know, we need a pro-growth conservative who can advance Paul Ryan's pro-growth agenda. He's got a very bold vision for America. He's begun that work through the Ways and Means Committee through fixing our broken tax code, taking the first steps to saving Social Security and Medicare for the long term, opening up new trade and new customers for American workers. We've got a lot of work to do there, but I've got the experience, having led two of the key subcommittees on Ways and Means with major results, including solving the way we pay doctors in Medicare, bipartisan, bicameral solution that I worked to help bring Republicans, Democrats, the House and Senate, physician groups around the country together. And so the chance, and also because I've led a committee, the Joint Economic Committee, which I worked hard to revitalize into a free market think tank, that's the experience and the reputation. We're working through all the ideologies. I think that can advance that pro-growth agenda.
And Mr. Brady, when you talk about tax reform, that's something that Chairman Ryan, now Speaker Ryan, has been working on and hasn't made a ton of progress in getting through the committee. His predecessor, Dave Camp, had the same thing. He had a full draft and it never came to a vote in the committee. Where does that stand in your mind, and what can you do if you become chairman to advance that?
One, fixing this broken tax code, reining in the IRS, you know, that's the type of big ideas that come out of the Ways and Means Committee. And I'm convinced Republicans in the House and some Democrats believe this is the big priority for us. And I'd correct this. Former Chairman Dave Camp really created the first top-to-bottom rewrite of the tax code in 3 decades. And he proved you could make it flatter, fairer, simpler. You could grow the economy. You could encourage new jobs. So that was an important first step. Chairman Ryan has already taken some other steps in the interim to make sure we're advancing it. For example, getting the scoring right so that we know the impact of a future tax code, working with Democrats and Republicans on international tax reform, and perhaps innovation incentives to allow American companies to do more R&D and manufacture here in the U.S. Every step he's taken has moved us closer to tax reform. Here's my pledge. I'm going to relentlessly pursue fixing this broken tax code. Every day, every week, we're going to take some step forward toward fixing this broken tax code. Thankfully, we have a Speaker of the House in Paul Ryan who understands how this can grow the economy. And that's what the Ways and Means Committee and Republicans are all about. Growth, both of our families' incomes, of our businesses' sales, of the U.S. economy. So, look, this is our top priority. We're gonna push it hard.
And what's a realistic time frame for that? Do you think it makes sense to do something that just goes after international and try and get it done this Congress, or is this really a 2017 project for you?
It could be a 2017 project because historically comprehensive reform has occurred in the first year of that president's term. But in the interim, we have right in front of us an opportunity to make key parts of the tax code permanent, such as the research and development tax credit. We're the only country in the world that has major parts of its tax code temporary, where we do it 1 year at a time, sometimes a few months at a time. That makes no sense at all. And so I know that Chairman Ryan had been pursuing an agreement with the Senate that could make some of these key provisions permanent. I'll do the same. We're hopeful we can come together. What we want to quit doing is this the end of the year temporary extensions that frankly don't do the economy any good, is a service that we think to our constituents.
Congressman, you are so far the only official challenger to you for this position on Ways and Means is Pat Tiberi, a Ohio congressman. Can you talk a little bit about how your pitch to colleagues is different from his, how you imagine you would be a different chairman than a Chairman Tiberi?
Well, Pat Tiberi is a good man and has done a good job on the Ways and Means Committee. My experience of leading two of the key subcommittees, healthcare and trade, my proven accomplishments, both in helping secure passage for 12 of the 14 free trade agreements we have in place, and then helping solve, helping craft, helping bring together all the elements for how we solve Medicare and pay our local doctors the doctor fixes we talk. That is the first significant reform of Medicare in decades. It really is the first important step to saving Medicare for the long term. I've already begun taking with our colleagues on Ways and Means Committee that second important step. And so having that experience, having the reputation working across our whole entire Republican Party to find the principles that unite us, those are my strengths. And again, having run a committee before, having really turned one around and did it in a way that is member-driven and brings out the priorities, that will be my strength. That's the pitch that I'll make to my colleagues.
We learned that fellow Texan Sam Johnson will be the interim head of Ways and Means. When will the process be finalized? When will you know what the outcome is?
The timetable hasn't been set. It could be as early next week or could be several weeks down the road. Whatever it is, we'll be ready. And the truth is, we're going to need a chairman who can hit the ground running on day one, because the experience that I bring to the committee, and I've run a committee myself, I can do that. So we're excited about the opportunity. We have 24 of the most talented people on Ways and Means Committee that you can imagine. We reflect the priorities of our Republican conference. We're really excited about both the work plan. We've already been working on these key reforms from tax and trade and Medicare and Social Security and welfare reform. The chance to do it with the Speaker in place who has those same priorities, it's pretty exciting.
Congressman, I wanted to follow up on the question of the timetable when a new chairman could be selected. There's a lot of discussion about overhauling the House Republican Conference rules, broadening, diversifying, changing the membership of the steering committee, which is the leadership appointed body that actually helps select who gets to serve on the various committees of the House. There's some discussion about changing that makeup. It could happen by Thanksgiving. It could happen before or after an election for a permanent chairman of Ways and Means. Do you think that you have the support you would need in the current steering committee? How do you feel about this current steering committee configuration, or some other configuration that we all have yet to see? They could hold your future in your hands.
Sure, that's a great question. We intend to win support, whether it's this steering committee or another one. In fact, these discussions about the rules, how the House operates, about how the steering committee is composed, these are really healthy discussions. I think every member wants to make sure in the Republican House that they have a say, in matters, that their ideas are heard. They have representatives at every level. So the discussions so far about ideas on new rules have been, I think, very healthy. I don't know what the timetable is for completing those discussions, whether that is sooner rather than later, but all in all, a new speaker is a fresh start. And one of the reasons that now Speaker Ryan has such strong support is that he is open to those ideas, because that's the way he ran the Ways and Means Committee. Very entrepreneurial. Whether you were the newest member or the longest serving member, if you did your work, had a good idea, worked through the cost of it, counted the noses to make sure there was support and ready to go. Those are the bills that moved, and so we see the same thing. One, that's how I'm going to run this committee, but two, that's how Speaker Ryan's going to run the House.
When you talk about tax reform as a 2017 project, that's, you're obviously hoping to have a Republican president. We've heard really dramatic tax plans from a lot of the candidates, multi-trillion-dollar tax cuts. Your Senator Cruz, has been unveiled his plan this week, calling for a value-added tax to replace the payroll and corporate income taxes. Do you have a favorite candidate and/or a favorite tax plan from among them? And what do you think of what you're hearing from your party's candidates?
Yeah, this is exciting. We've got presidents running for, our candidates running for president with specific pro-growth tax proposals. This hasn't happened in a long time. We've got a wide breadth of them, but that's appropriate because within our House Republican Conference we have a lot of ideas as well. Rather than just pick one among the others, what we're going to do in the Ways and Means Committee is both lay out the ideas that we've heard from members, the camp draft that's been developed. We have another proposal by Representative Devin Nunes that has a lot of pro-growth aspects to it, and we're going to lay that out, review them in detail, encourage and invite our Republican members to weigh in on this. We're also going to lay a foundation for tax reform. Our code is, I cannot tell you how incredibly complex it is. Our members need to have that foundation so that they can help us reach the right solution. For me, here's the principles I'm looking at. I want a tax code that's built for growth, for our families' growth, for our businesses' growth, one that grows our economy. I want to make sure the principles are it is fair, flatter, and simpler. We need to lower exemptions, eliminate loopholes so we can lower the rates for everybody. I want to make sure small businesses don't pay more than large businesses, which is what happens today. And I want to make sure all our companies are no longer uncompetitive when we compete around the world for profits, for sales, and for contracts. And at the end of the day, a final principle for me is we're not going to bail out Washington's spending problem through the tax code. This is all about growing the economy, doing it in a way that actually encourages investment along Main Street. And I can tell you that even since Dave Camp laid out his draft proposal, the world has become even more competitive on the tax side. So we're going to have to, I think, go even bolder in our tax reform. There's a number of ways we can get there. I think the right approach is to invite everyone into this discussion. And
just to follow on that briefly, do you think the U.S. needs and can afford a multi-trillion-dollar tax cut of the size, if not, we'll debate about the composition, but of the size that your candidates are talking about?
Well, at the end of the day, we need a tax code that isn't a drag on the economy. We need one that creates the types of jobs and investment that actually grows Washington revenues itself. I'm convinced spending cuts can get us halfway to a balanced budget. I think we're going to need a much stronger economy both to finish the job and to start paying down the national debt, which Speaker Ryan has made a clear goal as well. And to do that, we're going to need a very strong competitive tax code. That's what all this is about growth, and we can do this.
Well, we're talking about the GOP candidates in Wednesday night's debates. A number of them really criticized strongly the budget vote in the House of Representatives and the deal that was put together, a deal that you voted for. How do you square their criticism with your yes vote?
Well, let me tell you this. I think it's dangerous to keep holding our military hostage for politics, which this president repeatedly does. We're at war. And the opportunity to fully fund our military for 2 years with predictability and no more political games for that period, I'll take that any day. Secondly, the president wanted a blank check for more deficit spending. He was denied it. And instead, he got serious entitlement reforms. The first, I think, serious ones, significant ones in Social Security disability program that I've seen in a very, very long time. And those reforms actually stop the rampant fraud in the disability program. It makes sure help goes to those who are truly disabled, and it rewards those who want to go back to work. Those are very key principles. And at the end of the day, we ensured America paid its debts in full and on time. So from my key priorities, no blank check, strongly funding our military, serious entitlement reforms, and making sure we pay our debts. There were some very positive things in that agreement.
You were only one of 79, I believe, Republicans who voted for this budget deal on Wednesday night, and among those members, it was former Speaker Boehner, who rarely takes a vote. There were so few Republicans who supported this. Why do you think that more of them didn't feel, as you did, that there was a compelling reason to support this?
You know, I think we all see a much better future for our country. In the past, we've always believed the debt ceiling fight was an opportunity to really change the way this government spends. We've had good success, more than $2 trillion with a T of spending cuts negotiated through the other agreements. We had all hoped we would have a president willing to sit down and actually make those reforms. In the end, without many cards to play, Speaker Boehner put together perhaps the highest priorities for us, which is strongly funding the military, no blank check, and some serious entitlement reforms. I think our members would have loved that to have gone much farther than it has today. But, you know, at the end of the day, the job got done. We can move forward, and we've got, again, ideas in tax reform, in trade, in welfare reform. Those are the things we want to focus on. It's a chance to do this now.
On switching to trade, you know, you've got the TPP deal that'll at some point come up for vote, and you'd be, as chairman, in a big position to move it or to block it. What's your current thinking on the content of the TPP deal that the administration negotiated? This is the Trans-Pacific Partnership, and what's the timetable in your mind for when there might be a committee and a floor vote?
Sure. The timetable hasn't begun yet because we haven't had the text sent to us, the actual language. That should start the clock on this. And as you know, under the new trade rules that we passed, the American public will have a full 60 days to review every word in that trade agreement. Congress, lawmakers will have plenty of time to review it as well. And so once we start digging through that, you're going to see opinions formed about whether this agreement is good for America. Here's the point that I would make. This is all about economic freedom. This is about the freedom to buy and sell and compete around the world with as little government interference as possible. The problem, America is very open, but when we try to sell abroad, you know, we find these America need not apply signs. So this agreement, like others, is about tearing down those signs, basically insisting if you sell into America, we get to sell two-way into your country. I'm going to weigh, and when we do that, by the way, we win. Our sales go up, our exports go up, we create jobs. I'm going to be viewing the Trans-Pacific Partnership as a huge potential customer base for our American workers and companies. I want to make sure not that just every commodity ended up in the right place, but that we did the right architecture, that we had made sure that there was the right place to take our disputes when we make investments in other countries to be competitive. Did we get the labor and the environmental provisions right? Because all of that, did we deal with state-owned enterprises from other countries the right way? Because if we get the architecture right, it not only works for this agreement, it works for the next ones, which we're negotiating currently with Europe as well.
7 minutes left.
Congressman, there are currently 6 committee chairman from the state of Texas in the House of Representatives. You would be the 7th if you were elected chairman of Ways and Means. There's some concern that maybe, even though Texas is the largest Republican delegation in the House, that maybe 7 Texas congressmen running committees might be too much. What do you say to those critics?
You know, we are, as a state, right about where California was with 6 and 5 committee chairmen in the recent past, with a much larger delegation. Term limits, as you know, we term limit our chairman, and so, you know, these things tend to ebb and flow. And I always like to point out that that these chairmen, in fact, all of our committee chairmen, extremely talented, weren't just chosen by the steering committee, they were elected by the entire Republican conference. And so my thought at the end of the day, the Ways and Means Committee is so critical. It's not just about one state. It's really about the state and the direction our country is going. And if you've got a pro-growth conservative who has a proven record of working throughout our conference on health care, on trade, on a number of these issues, that is going to listen, that's going to unite us behind common principles, find that common ground to get the country turned back around. Those skills and that experience, I believe, will carry the day.
Speaking of Texas, for viewers who don't know you, can you just tell us a bit about your district outside of Houston and how the particular industries or people or shape of that district affect the way you approach issues?
Well, I think all of us are shaped by our life. I actually grew up in South Dakota, the Black Hills of South Dakota, and there it was an economy shaped by agriculture, a military base, and international tourism. I chose as a profession Chamber of Commerce work so I could help. I loved it because you could help start small businesses, build the economy, recruit new industry. In Beaumont, Texas, where I served, it was heavy Rust Belt type of industries, major labor problems, and refinery type issues. Where I live today is a combination of suburban and rural communities where energy is important, healthcare is important, trade's important as well. But I've always had a blend of a lot of rural counties and a suburban county, and so having in effect experience in almost 9 different types of economies and having that Main Street perspective, that's what drives my role in the Ways and Means Committee. That's why I look at every issue from the standpoint, will this grow Main Street jobs? Whether it's rural Iowa in Wisconsin or whether it's New York City, what we're trying to do is grow the entire economy. So that shapes my views, and I think also is a strength as we lead this committee.
4 minutes left.
Also, this past week, you saw the Federal Reserve again decide not to raise interest rates yet and hold that decision for later in the year or maybe next year. What's your view on what the Fed should be doing and whether the economy is strong enough at this point to sustain an interest rate hike?
Yeah, the Fed needs to be normalizing its monetary policy sooner rather than later. They've been out of bullets for a long time. The impact of the stimulus has long faded. Everyone in the market, everyone in the world knows the Fed needs to begin clearly communicating its step, taking those steps to build some confidence, because I really worry that there is confidence in the Fed to actually begin normalizing the rates. I worry that they might not only delay it, but do a one-and-done strategy, make a minor change and then go back to what they're doing today. And they can begin normalizing monetary policy by the roll-offs of the securities they have and lowering their balance sheets. So again, I think the Fed, while it played a key role in stabilizing the economy, I think it has been trying to do too much for too long. And over the long term, I think it's actually held back investment in the United States.
Congressman, you're the ranking member of the Ways and Means Committee. Sandy Levin is, he's been the chairman, ranking member. I'm sure you've worked with him in various capacities. How do you think your working relationship would be if you became chairman? And especially, Mr. Levin says he's running for re-election, so this could, there could be, another 2.5 years, 3 years working together.
We had a chance to work together, Mr. Levin and I, on the trade subcommittee, both as ranking and as leader, and I have a terrific relationship with him. We also, through how we solved how Medicare pays its doctors, had, frankly, many months of negotiations working together come to that bipartisan agreement. And then as leader of the Health Subcommittee, we've together in Ways and Means Committee moved a number of fraud pieces, significant improvements to Medicare. We continue to build those bipartisan health care issues, and so I see the relationship as very good. We're gonna go to our corners on the Affordable Care Act. We see a much different vision for how health care ought to be delivered, but on saving Medicare and Social Security for the long term, in trade issues, and I think there are parts of tax reform that a Sandy Levin or any member of the Democrat part of our Ways and Means Committee can agree with. And so we're going to take the same approach, try to find those common principles, respect and listen to each other, try to do what we can do to move this country in a better direction.
We have 1 minute. Richard, you have a final question?
Yeah, you had mentioned some of the tax extenders, trying to get some of those made permanent this year in agreement with the Senate. Which of those do you think stand the best chance, the ones that you're really going to fight to make sure they get made permanent?
Yeah, the temporary provisions that grow the economy that ought to be made permanent and should have been a long time ago. The research and development tax credit is so critical to innovation. The expensing type of provisions that encourage a local business to invest in a building, equipment, software, all of those drive the economy. That ought to be priority number one. And by the way, I can't underscore how important it is we do that for tax reform. We need certainty, and we need to get a better bang for the buck, and it's honest scorekeeping. So again, tackling this issue is another serious step toward comprehensive tax reform.
Well, Mr. Brady, thank you for being our guest on Newsmakers this week, your return to the program. And if you're successful in your bid as chairman, I hope you'll continue to join us so we can ask questions about this big issue of tax reform.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks for your time. Well, at the beginning, Mr. Brady was optimistic about Paul Ryan's success, thinking that his honeymoon might be longer than some predict. What do you know about the Freedom Caucus, which has been the thorn in the side of Mr. Boehner, and how likely they are to want to cooperate?
It's interesting. The Freedom Caucus was ultimately, at one point, was prepared to vote for rank-and-file Florida Republican Congressman Daniel Webster on the floor, in conference and on the floor. Now Speaker Ryan, it's funny to say that instead of Speaker Boehner, Speaker Ryan's emergence as a candidate and sort of the pitch to members that he run as a consensus candidate caused Freedom Caucus members to kind of regroup a little bit, and they decided not to formally endorse him, but to give him a supermajority of support. Ryan ultimately was able to make a case to them that he would be a different kind of speaker, that he would be more inclusive, that he would be more collaborative, that he would bring these different voices in, change the makeup of the steering committee, do a bottom-up approach to legislating instead of a top-down. That appealed to a lot of members of the Freedom Caucus, and they decided that they were going to get on board for the time being. They've made it clear that this is perhaps a trial run, that they're giving him the benefit of the doubt, but if he doesn't live up to promises to be this new inclusive speaker the way that they thought that Daniel Webster could be, I don't think you'll see a hesitation for them to make that known, as they made it known to then Speaker Boehner that they were not happy with his job performance.
But in the candidates' debate last night, there were a number of GOP candidates who see what happened this week, which Paul Ryan and Speaker Boehner were behind on this budget deal, as business as usual and not what the Republicans really came to Washington to change.
Right, and I think we'll see that manifest itself the next time, not that there's a Republican priority on the floor, but the next time there's a deadline-driven, bipartisan deal that has to get dealt with. So,
and what is the next one slated?
Well, see, you have a few out there. You have a highway bill that, maybe sometime in November, December. You have the tax extenders that Mr. Brady was talking about. You have the need to do an omnibus appropriations bill sometime in December. All of those can or might be places where there's an agreement between Mitch McConnell, Harry Reid, Barack Obama, and maybe Paul Ryan and Nancy Pelosi. And if those five get together, they have a lot of power to push something. How does Ryan handle that? How does the Freedom Caucus accept or reject that? And what does that look like? And so he's got a honeymoon period, and Boehner bought him some time by getting this debt limit and budget deal done. But that's the first thing I'll be looking for is like, what's that first crisis deadline moment that's a bipartisan bill that he's got to sell?
Yeah, and I think that's a very good point about sort of we call the big four, which is the House and Senate majority and minority leaders, the Speaker, minority leader, majority leader in the Senate. They do have tremendous power. You can't bring 435 members of Congress into the White House to negotiate any major deal with the president, whoever the president is. Speaker Ryan can talk about having a more collaborative legislative process, but ultimately he's the one who's going to have to make certain decisions. So I think you're absolutely right that it's going to be fascinating to see how he navigates that space with all of these deadlines coming up. And the next 2 months are going to be huge, I think, in sort of setting the tone for how he'll handle that dynamic.
And when we talk about the big four, this is actually a really interesting moment. The the previous big four, Boehner, Pelosi, McConnell, and Reid, had changed jobs among them, when the majorities and minorities flipped. But those four had been together since the beginning of 2007. It's the longest stretch we've ever had, since the Senate majority leader system developed in the 20s, of the same four people negotiating everything and being in those same four jobs. And so, from the public's perspective, instead of seeing, when they see those photos of the White House where the president is meeting with the leaders from Congress, there's now a different face at the table for the first time since 2007. Remember, it's these same four negotiated TARP in 2008. They didn't negotiate the stimulus, but you see what I mean. There's just been this shift that's really the first time it's happened in a long time, and Ryan will inject a different voice at that table.
But Paul Ryan does have some experience as a negotiator. He was appointed to do that earlier in budget negotiations, so he understands how to craft a deal that can go forward. Yeah,
I wrote a story earlier this week about that, and basically when you talk to Democrats who've negotiated with him, they say we find him really that he's accommodating, he's approachable, he knows the subject matter, and he's completely inflexible, and we disagree with him. So he does have some experience. The deal he got with Patty Murray in 2013 was a significant one, and so I think what Democrats are watching is how he's going to approach that, how he's going to negotiate, and is he inflexible, Paul Ryan of the conservative vision, or is Speaker Ryan a different kind of animal?
Final thoughts.
What do you think of Speaker Ryan would have? What do you think if it had been Speaker Ryan who had been behind Ryan Murray, though? Because not the majority of Republicans did not vote for that budget agreement.
Right, and that's exactly right. And he still leads a very fractured, very fractious Republican conference, or he now leads it, right? And it's welcome to a really challenging job. There's a reason John Boehner left. The job at this particular moment is a really tough one.
Well, thanks to both of you. We're recording this on Thursday, which is always a momentous day, the election of a new Speaker of the House of Representatives. It's a day when there's lots of smiles and backpatting all around, but we'll see how long it lasts. Thank you for being with us this week.
Thank you.
Thanks.